My husband took my inheritance to impress his mistress, then my 10-year-old exposed him. Isabella Tenner always believed in quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. At 35, she was a woman whose presence was calm and gentle, a subtle light that warmed a suburban home she shared with her husband, Michael, and their 10-year-old daughter, Sophia. Their neighborhood was the kind where lawns were manicured, cars gleamed as if freshly polished, and smiles were perfectly rehearsed. But beneath the postcard-perfect surface of their lives, Isabella felt a gnawing unease, a whisper that something was off, though she struggled to name it. Isabella wasn't wealthy by choice. The modest inheritance left to her by her late grandmother was a secret treasure she guarded fiercely, tucked away from the world, and even to some extent from Michael. It was money she planned to one day use for Sophia's future, to buy a home where dreams could grow or fund a college education without worry. She had never flaunted it, never used it as leverage or pride, because to her it represented safety and hope, fragile threads she refused to let unravel. Michael was the opposite. Charismatic and urbane, he carried himself like a man destined for better things than the quiet suburbs. And sometimes that vision put him at odds with Isabella's cautious nature. She noticed the way his eyes lingered too long on expensive cars that passed their street, the way he mentioned the right connections in business just a little too often. Yet she chalked it up to ambition, hoping his dreams wouldn't cost what little peace they'd built together. One dim autumn evening, Isabella returned home early from work, clutching a sheaf of mail she hadn't had time to open yet. Among the usual bills was a thick envelope from their financial advisor. Tired, she tossed it on the kitchen table, planning to read it later, but curiosity got the better of her. As she flipped it open, her heart stalled. The documents inside detailed several large transfers from her inheritance account to Michael's personal business ventures. Amounts she had never approved, and dates that painfully overlapped with the rise in their household expenses. Worse, the advisor's note hinted at these payments being used to maintain appearances. Confusion quickly twisted into disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself, stomach sinking. Then her phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. A photo of Michael and Claire, his new mistress, at a lavish restaurant, champagne in hand, smiles wide and unrestrained. Isabella's world cracked open, the image blaring louder than any words. The man she had trusted, the father of her child, was using her inheritance to finance a life built on lies. Her hands trembled, a tidal wave of humiliation washing over her. She imagined how their neighbors would gossip if they knew the truth. At that moment, the walls of their suburban home, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage. She wanted to scream, to confront Michael that instant, but fear held her tongue. That night, as she lay awake, the shadows of betrayal pressed down, and Isabella realized her battle had only just begun. The days that followed the shocking discovery felt like a slow unraveling of everything Isabella had believed in. Michael's mask of charm never slipped in public, but behind closed doors, his cold indifference was a crushing weight. When she finally confronted him, hoping for some semblance of explanation, his reaction was a sharp dismissal, a smirk that stabbed deeper than any apology could have. "You don't understand how the world works," he said, as if cold, calculating self-interest was a lesson she was too naive to grasp. The sharpness in his tone twisted in Isabella's heart, making her feel small and foolish for expecting honesty. What made it worse was how quickly the whispers began circulating in their tight-knit community. At the grocery store, a neighbor's glance lingered with a hint of pity. At school functions, subtle glances and half-veiled murmurs followed her steps like shadows. The same people who once nodded politely now exchanged pointed looks, some judging, others simply amused at her misfortune. The silent social cliff she was pushed over was as crushing as the betrayal itself. Pride clenched tightly in her throat, but the humiliation seeped deep, an invisible stain that made her shrink from the world. Isabella's vulnerability was laid bare. not only because of Michael's betrayal, but because of the implicit message from those around her. She had failed to keep her life and her marriage in order. The money she had saved, the trust she had given, it all seemed to mock her now. She could feel the walls closing in, the suffocating weight of being exposed in a way she never wanted. Yet, amid the growing storm, a quiet ember of determination flickered inside her. She was no stranger to hardship, and though wounded, she refused to let herself be defined by this humiliation. Still, the days dragged heavily, and regaining control was no simple task. Michael's behavior grew bolder as he paraded a lifestyle funded by her inheritance, displaying his mistress in social circles as if daring Isabella to fight back. Invitations came to exclusive parties where he made a point of excluding her, and neighborhood gossip sessions seemed to target her unspoken misery. Behind his polished smile was a man thriving on her silent suffering, feeding his ego with each whispered joke about his power moves. To the community, he was a success story. To Isabella, he was a tyrant exploiting her trust. Yet even in these dark moments, the smallest sparks of hope emerged unexpectedly. Sophia, their daughter, remained Isabella's anchor, her bright-eyed, innocent questions and unconditional love quietly kindling strength. Sometimes, late at night, Isabella caught herself imagining a different future, one where this pain became the catalyst for change. It was a fragile hope, almost too delicate to hold on to, but it hinted at a possibility beyond the shame and betrayal that now marked her days. Life's cruel lessons were delivered without mercy, but in the quiet corners of Isabella's heart, the fight was beginning to stir. She knew she wasn't alone, even if everyone else seemed to have turned their gaze away. To anyone feeling trapped by betrayal or humiliation, remember, your worth isn't defined by others' judgments. Sometimes, the darkest moments are the soil where new strength begins to grow. Isabella's initial resolve to confront Michael had been shattered, but she was determined to find a way forward, no matter how unclear the path seemed. She tried to hold the pieces of her shattered world together through small, careful steps, keeping her routines, maintaining a calm facade at school meetings, and shielding Sophia from the storm raging in her home. Yet, every attempt felt like walking on thin ice. Behind her quiet smiles lurked an overwhelming sense of powerlessness she rarely let anyone see. At first, Isabella thought she might reclaim control by taking charge of the family finances. But Michael's control was subtler and more suffocating than she realized. Every time she questioned a bill or a bank statement, he sidestepped explanations with practiced ease, claiming he managed matters better and dismissing her concerns as worry without cause. Financial institutions seemed tangled in his web of influence, and without hard proof, Isabella found herself hitting invisible walls. The frustration of not being heard, not being believed, only deepened her exhaustion. On a particularly bleak afternoon, she sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the silence punctuated by Sophia's distant laughter playing upstairs. Isabella's hands trembled as she paged through bank statements and emails, searching for anything concrete. She found herself stuck in a cruel loop of hope and disappointment, the hope that the next document might reveal a solution, and the disappointment when it led nowhere. Doubts crept in relentlessly. Was she naive? Was she fighting a losing battle? The isolation was suffocating, even as friends offered well-meaning but shallow support, unsure how to help without judgment. Yet, amid these setbacks, small moments of courage flickered. One evening, Isabella shared a quiet walk with Sophia after dinner. The child's questions about fairness and calmness struck chords that rekindled Isabella's dwindling hope. The memory of her daughter's trust, her innocence, became a beacon in the dark, a reminder that this battle was about more than money or pride. It was about reclaiming dignity and creating a future where Sophia could grow up safe from betrayal. Isabella began discreetly researching her legal options, learning slowly about women's rights and financial protections. With every article she read and every story she encountered, a new fire sparked within her. She found small comfort in the stories of other women who had refused to stay silent, who had turned their shame into strength. The journey ahead still seemed uncertain and terrifying, but those faint lights in the distance beckoned her forward. Despite these glimmers, despair still clawed at her during lonely, sleepless nights. The weight of humiliation was not something she could easily shed, and the fear of losing everything was a constant shadow. Yet, Isabella's story was far from over. Each struggle, every moment of doubt, every small victory, was shaping the woman who would one day stand unbowed. If you ever find yourself in a place where the walls seem to be closing in, or when every step feels like a battle, remember that even in the most silent struggles, strength begins to form. Sometimes the smallest light can shine through the deepest darkness, guiding us toward hope and healing. The breaking point came on a cold Friday evening, a night that would forever etch itself into Isabella's memory as the lowest she had ever fallen. Michael had organized a lavish dinner at their newly renovated mansion, the very place funded by the inheritance Isabella had cherished and guarded for years. The opulence was overwhelming. Glittering chandeliers, polished marble floors, and an array of expensive wines that spoke of extravagance beyond their means. But the worst part wasn't the wealth. It was the spectacle Michael had planned with calculated cruelty. As guests arrived, Isabella's role was reduced to a mere shadow, ignored, unseen, unacknowledged. Michael introduced Claire as his partner with a wicked gleam, parading her like a trophy beneath the eyes of their elite social circle. Murmurs of admiration for the mistress's beauty, mixed with pitying looks cast in Isabella's direction. She felt the sting of every whisper, every sly glance, every pointed smile. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she stood rooted near the doorway, strangled by a silence she refused to break. The culmination of this public betrayal came when Michael announced that he had legally renegotiated control over the family's monetary affairs, excluding Isabella entirely. In front of everyone, he declared that Isabella no longer had any say in the management of their assets, framing it as a practical decision to streamline business operations. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach, a brutal acknowledgement that her trust and loyalty had been traded away publicly, without even the decency of private confrontation. Isabella's heart shattered as she felt eyes flash with judgment or worse, amusement. The room hummed with uneasy energy, the kind that whispers of power shifting and alliances dissolving. She caught a glimpse of Claire's smirk, a sharp blade cutting deeper than any shouted insult could. Her world had shrunk to this moment, exposed, powerless, and drowning in an unbearable blend of betrayal and shame. Yet beneath the layers of hurt, a quiet resolve began to stir. The weight of public humiliation, though devastating, awoke in Isabella a seed of defiance she hadn't known existed. If this was the depth of her fall, then rising from it would require every ounce of strength she could summon. The battle was no longer about money alone. It was about reclaiming her dignity and protecting the innocence of the one bright light in her life, Sophia. Isabella's mind flicked to her daughter, sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware of the harsh realities unfolding downstairs. The innocence of that child sparked an ember of fierce protective love that no money or power could buy. Somewhere deep inside, a plan began to form, and with it a glimmer of hope that this crushing deceit might, paradoxically, be the beginning of something greater. For anyone who has ever felt at their lowest, silenced, or trampled under the weight of injustice, remember, the darkest moments can kindle a fire. It's in the depths of our struggles that true resilience takes root, often unseen, quietly growing until one day it breaks through with unstoppable force. And if you're following Isabella's journey, stay with us. Her story is far from over, and the coming chapters hold revelations you won't want to miss. After the unbearable public confrontation at the company meeting, where everything Sophia had worked for seemed to crumble beneath her, she felt as if the walls around her were closing in. The whispers, The sidelong glances, the cold shoulders, they all pressed down harder than she'd ever imagined possible. Alone in her small apartment, the weight of humiliation threatened to suffocate her spirit. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage holding her in a prison built by others' assumptions. The late evening light cast long shadows, mirroring the dark doubts swirling inside her. Was she really as incompetent as her colleagues claimed? Was her dream of growing in this company just a naive fantasy? Her reflection in the cracked mirror looked tired, more fragile than she recalled. But somewhere inside, beneath the layers of doubt, a quiet ember flickered. She thought back to the first time she'd spoken up during a brainstorming session, how her ideas had sparked excitement, and how her persistence had earned respect, not scorn. That memory offered a tiny thread of hope, fragile yet persistent. The next morning brought no relief. Emails went unanswered, and the office atmosphere remained icy. But then, nestled in her inbox, came a message from someone she hadn't expected to hear from, Mia. A quiet colleague who always worked behind the scenes but had noticed Sophia's struggles. "If you ever want to talk or need help, I'm here," the note read. Sophia hesitated, but decided to accept. Meeting in a small coffee shop on a rainy afternoon, Mia shared her own story of being underestimated and sidelined early in her career. Her words didn't erase Sophia's pain, but they illuminated a path out of the darkness. Sometimes, the strongest allies come from the most unexpected places. The conversation sparked something deeper in Sophia, a conviction that she didn't have to face this alone. With renewed resolve, she began jotting down her ideas late into the night, revisiting her original plans and spotting flaws she could fix, strategies she could refine. Yet the shadows of doubt weren't easily pushed away. She tried to speak up in team meetings again, but her voice faltered, silenced by fear of mockery. A client presentation that should have been a chance to shine turned into a disaster when technical issues arose, only fueling office gossip. It seemed one step forward, two steps back. But in those quiet defeats, Sophia learned something unexpected: humility mixed with self-compassion. The ability to admit she was still learning became her secret weapon, no longer needing to impress or prove herself to everyone. She focused on substance over applause, on growth over immediate success. Her empathy deepened as she observed others' quiet battles hidden behind confident smiles. The workplace became less a battlefield and more a complex community, and she started identifying small ways to support colleagues who seemed as isolated as she had felt. As she quietly lifted others, an intricate network of trust began to take form. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it held the promise of change. One afternoon, as she left the office with the sun dipping low in the sky, a message popped up on her phone from her manager, a request for a private conversation. Anxiety surged, but beneath it lay a flicker of hope. Was this the moment when the tide might finally turn? If you've ever felt like giving up when the world seems against you, remember, sometimes the smallest connections can light the darkest paths. Keep believing in yourself, even when the silence feels deafening. Sophia's heart pounded as she stepped into the manager's office, the door closing softly behind her. The room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, a stark contrast to the storm raging in her mind. Her manager, Mr. Thompson, sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable but not unkind. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Then he leaned forward, clasping his hands, and spoke in a tone that caught Sophia off guard. "Sophia, I want to be honest with you. The situation hasn't gone unnoticed. But sometimes things aren't as they first appear." Her brow furrowed, surprise mingling with confusion. Mr. Thompson continued, "I've reviewed the project files and your communications. The accusations against you were based on misunderstandings and, frankly, some misguided attempts by others to undermine your credibility. I'm sorry you had to go through that." Relief and disbelief collided inside her chest. Was this real? Had justice quietly crept in while she battled despair? Then came the revelation that changed everything. Mr. Thompson revealed that an internal inquiry was underway to address the toxic behaviors some team members exhibited, including the colleague who had orchestrated much of the public humiliation. "We are committed to building an environment where respect and collaboration come first," he assured. The weight that had been crushing Sophia began to lift, replaced by a cautious hope. But that wasn't all. Mr. Thompson offered her a chance to lead a new initiative, one focused on innovation and team cohesion, as a testimony to his trust in her abilities. Outside the office window, the bustling city seemed somehow softer, kinder. That same day, word began to spread. Whispers shifted tone, eyes no longer narrowed with judgment, but widened in newfound respect. Some colleagues apologized quietly, their expressions sheepish but sincere. Even those who had been cold and distant started engaging with her, albeit tentatively. The very people who had once humiliated her now watched as Sophia's quiet strength redefined her place within the team. One particularly striking moment came when Mia, her ally, gathered a small group to acknowledge Sophia's resilience publicly, turning a previously tense space into one where support blossomed. Yet the most powerful change was within Sophia herself. The humiliation that once threatened to define her became the fire that forged her resilience. She learned to carry her scars not with shame, but with pride, symbols of battles fought and won. The antagonist's expressions shifted from smug satisfaction to stunned silence as Sophia's confidence grew, not from conquest, but from the unwavering belief in her worth and potential. It was then that a surprise act of kindness truly solidified this transformation. One afternoon, the colleague who had led the smear campaign approached Sophia, voice hesitant but genuine. "I owe you an apology," she admitted. Sophia, with all the grace she'd cultivated, accepted it, not as weakness, but as strength, opening a door to healing and maturity. The office, once a minefield of judgment and exclusion, began to feel like a place where renewal was possible. If you faced betrayal or unjust judgment, remember, sometimes the hardest moments can open the way to unexpected support and change. Compassion and truth may arrive when least expected, lighting a path forward. Hold on to your courage. Better days often wait just beyond the darkest nights. With the new initiative underway, Sophia stepped into her role with a quiet determination that surprised even herself. Leading the innovation project was no small task. Her days were packed with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and collaboration with teams that once regarded her with suspicion. But beneath her composed exterior, a fierce resolve burned. She need show not just her competence, but the kind of leadership that inspired trust and unity. Early challenges emerged as expected. Resistance from some colleagues lingered, subtle and passive-aggressive, while unexpected hurdles in the project threatened delays. Yet Sophia refused to let setbacks define her journey. Each obstacle became an opportunity for creative problem-solving and deeper connection with her team. Her empathy, sharpened by previous pain, allowed her to listen beyond words, tuning into fears and hopes unspoken. The project gradually transformed from a mere task into a beacon of possibility, fostering a renewed spirit among the group. One pivotal moment came during a crucial presentation to the company's executives. Sophia stood before the room, her voice steady, eyes bright with conviction, as she unveiled the project's progress. The executives, initially skeptical, leaned in closer, intrigued by the innovative ideas and the collaborative culture Sophia cultivated. When she concluded, the room erupted in applause, a powerful contrast to the cold rejection she had endured months before. It wasn't just professional recognition. It was validation of her growth, her courage to rise above the wounds inflicted by judgment and humiliation. Meanwhile, those who once sought to belittle her felt the shifting tides. The colleague who had orchestrated much of the sabotage found herself increasingly isolated as her actions were formally addressed by management. Accountability became more than a word. It was a reality. The office dynamics evolved, respect replacing rivalry, and cooperation edging out divisiveness. Sophia observed these changes not with triumphalism, but with a sense of justice, where integrity prevailed over cruelty. In quieter moments, Sophia felt waves of relief and gratitude wash over her. Her journey from humiliation to empowerment wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The woman who once doubted her every step now stood tall, embodying resilience and grace. She also embraced the value of forgiveness, recognizing that strength often lies in releasing bitterness rather than clinging to it. Her growth rippled outward, inspiring others who witnessed her story unfold. Colleagues began sharing their own struggles, finding in Sophia a symbol of hope and the possibility of transformation. It was as if her courage had unlocked a silent door within the team, one leading to greater authenticity and mutual support. Sophia's story became a testament to the power of perseverance, proof that even when the world seems intent on breaking you, the human spirit can rebuild stronger than before. Her unwavering commitment to kindness and excellence reshaped not only her career, but also the culture around her, reminding everyone that empathy and courage are the true foundations of success. When faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, remember Sophia's path. That justice can emerge from the darkest trials, and that rising with dignity changes not just your world, but the world around you. Sophia's heart pounded as she stepped into the manager's office, the door closing softly behind her. The room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, a stark contrast to the storm raging in her mind. Her manager, Mr. Thompson, sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable but not unkind. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Then he leaned forward, clasping his hands, and spoke in a tone that caught Sophia off guard. "Sophia, I want to be honest with you. The situation hasn't gone unnoticed, but sometimes things aren't as they first appear." Her brow furrowed, surprise mingling with confusion. Mr. Thompson continued, "I've reviewed the project files and your communications. The accusations against you were based on misunderstandings and, frankly, some misguided attempts by others to undermine your credibility. I'm sorry you had to go through that." Relief and disbelief collided inside her chest. Was this real? Had justice quietly crept in while she battled despair? Then came the revelation that changed everything. Mr. Thompson revealed that an internal inquiry was underway to address the toxic behaviors some team members exhibited, including the colleague who had orchestrated much of the public humiliation. "We are committed to building an environment where respect and collaboration come first," he assured. The weight that had been crushing Sophia began to lift, replaced by a cautious hope. But that wasn't all. Mr. Thompson offered her a chance to lead a new initiative, one focused on innovation and team cohesion, as a testimony to his trust in her abilities. Outside the office window, the bustling city seemed somehow softer, kinder. That same day, word began to spread. Whispers shifted tone, eyes no longer narrowed with judgment, but widened in newfound respect. Some colleagues apologized quietly, their expressions sheepish but sincere. Even those who had been cold and distant started engaging with her, albeit tentatively. The very people who had once humiliated her now watched as Sophia's quiet strength redefined her place within the team. One particularly striking moment came when Mia, her ally, gathered a small group to acknowledge Sophia's resilience publicly, turning a previously tense space into one where support blossomed. Yet, the most powerful change was within Sophia herself. The humiliation that once threatened to define her became the fire that forged her resilience. She learned to carry her scars, not with shame, but with pride, symbols of battles fought and won. The antagonist's expressions shifted from smug satisfaction to stunned silence as Sophia's confidence grew, not from conquest, but from the unwavering belief in her worth and potential. It was then that a surprise act of kindness truly solidified this transformation. One afternoon, the colleague who had led the smear campaign approached Sophia, voice hesitant but genuine. "I owe you an apology," she admitted. Sophia, with all the grace she'd cultivated, accepted it, not as weakness, but as strength, opening a door to healing and maturity. The office, once a minefield of judgment and exclusion, began to feel like a place where renewal was possible. If you faced betrayal or unjust judgment, remember, sometimes the hardest moments can open the way to unexpected support and change. Compassion and truth may arrive when least expected, lighting a path forward. Hold on to your courage. Better days often wait just beyond the darkest nights.